already published a source material video in the lead up to this film's release. Let's just reuse that video's intro, shall we? Perhaps with an extra twist or two.
That's the thing. He's white.
I can follow you like a dog to the end of the world.
He's white?
Ooh, let me see! Oh wait, I can't read.
Hi, I'm LadyJenevia, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. If you are new here, hello. The primary thing I do on this channel is I review films that are released in cinemas, because the cinema is vastly superior to streaming, and we come to this place for magic. I also discuss source material because I like to study the adaptation process, see which works are being greenlit for adaptations, and most important of all, in this space, we promote libraries. These are all library books I have checked out right now, a good amount of which are for studying source material for adaptations, but there are also other books in there that I simply felt like reading, and things that I wanted to learn more about. I'm about to pick on two Australians for extremely poor acting, the worst I've ever seen from both of them, but for any Australians in the audience, I will have you know that one of my favorite filmmakers working right now is Baz Luhrmann. You tell me that Baz Luhrmann and Catherine Martin are doing a new movie, that's all I need to know. I'm there.
Bit of foreplay, you know, twinkle in the eye, the deed, you know, pregnancy.
Do you see this book? This is the second Joan of Arc book I have gotten from the library this year, and I'm reading this specifically because Baz Luhrmann is doing a Joan of Arc movie.
Talking about French people? All got loads to say.
But alas, sadly, we are not gathered here today to talk about the true diva and deliverer of bombastic, anachronistic artistry, Baz Luhrmann. We are instead going to talk about the single worst adaptation I have ever seen in a cinema, and it's not even close. This Wuthering Heights film has been mired in controversy with every new announcement it has released, but I held back on being too forthcoming with my skepticism about what this film appeared to be doing back when I made my source material video, because the main thing I wanted to accomplish with that video was to hopefully get people to read or reread the book, and be able to have that knowledge help to inform their opinions about what this film would eventually be. But now, having seen Wuthering Heights, it's not even remotely Wuthering Heights, it's Withering Lows. The insistence of whitewashing Heathcliff was already a heinous decision to commit to, regardless of how many times this whitewashing has been inflicted on this book across decades of so-called adaptations. And desperately attempting to make a romantic and salacious story from a book about generational trauma, racism, classism, abuse, and revenge, it's a weird choice. But if all of those weren't reasons enough to be put off by the film, it was also mind-numbingly boring. A harbinger of anti-intellectualism, Wuthering Heights removes all the nuance and character of Bronte's novel. Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi give the worst acting of their careers in a film that's as entertaining as a lobotomy in slow motion. The most shocking part of the film was not the predictably desperate attempts to elicit a response by way of cheap shock value stunts, but how boring it was. We must have been half an hour or so into the film's runtime when I kept thinking to myself, are we done yet? Can we be done yet? Every 5 to 10 minutes for the rest of the film, I would note how it felt as though I had been there for hours. Surely we must be finished by now. And no, all of that started when I had another hour and 45 minutes to sit through. At least now I know what will be my last place in the adaptations video I will be doing at the end of this year, because even the lowest ranked adaptations I listed in last year's adaptations video were nowhere near as egregious and banal as this. From the mind that gave you Bad Cinderella because her father is a wealthy jewelry designer, so Andrew Lloyd Webber has been a family friend from the time that she was growing up. The mind that gave you The Talented Mr. Ripley, but worse. The mind that gave you The Unpunished Assaults Are Definitely Going to Be Fine Now because the police are on the way and surely they will fix it, comes an audaciously defiant commitment to anti-intellectualism known as quotation marks Wuthering Heights. The repeated references to Heathcliff in the book being a dark-skinned person of color, who is repeatedly racially abused by the majority of people we see him meet and encounter and live with while he's growing up, have now been mutated into a white Australian in a bad wig, one that's somehow not even the worst wig in this film, as childhood Catherine has by far the crustiest, mustiest, dustiest shake-and-go wig, which is entirely unbecoming of a film with an $80 million production budget. You didn't have $1,000 to spare from that budget on a decent wig for her to wear? Or perhaps hire a dialect coach to fix whatever it was that Margot Robbie was attempting to do for the voice of her character. It didn't even sound like a generically posh English accent, let alone a posh woman specifically from Yorkshire. Although it might sound like I have nothing positive to say about this film, the one flicker of a decent something, the whisper of a thrill of something watchable, was delivered by none other than Scholavera alumni Alison Oliver, who somehow managed to create something edible out of a screenplay made of crumbs. When Isabella's introduction consisted of her slightly off-kilter ramblings about how great Romeo and Juliet is, I knew she would be the one and only character I would feel anything close to affection for.
Because I know you're a fan of Shakespeare.
More than a fan. We're involved.
If money is tight for you and you're not able to go to the cinema often, and you don't want to go there unless it's something you really expect you're going to love wholeheartedly, my only recommendation as far as this film is concerned is to simply wait for it to hit streaming and wait for someone to do a supercut of all of the Isabella scenes. Well, maybe not all of them, but everything before she has the misfortune of marrying G'day Heathcliff. And watch that highlight reel once it's been posted on YouTube. Everything else about this film was a series of bad decisions, just one right after the other. This desperate attempt to spin Wuthering Heights into a more corporate, commercial story, that of a romance between two white people,
He only circles white people.
is nothing new when it comes to the many whitewashed so-called adaptations of Emily Bronte's novel. But part of what's particularly astonishing with how bad this film is its total inability to create believable romantic or sexual chemistry between its two lead performers. When they finally reach a point of having these two characters clear up the misunderstanding that sent Heathcliff off into the world to try to make his fortune, and have them reach a place of declaring their love for one another, it's not convincing in the slightest. Jacob Elordi was not convincing me of Heathcliff's love for Catherine during this scene. He looked like he was uncomfortable and wanted to be literally anywhere else in the world instead of making this film. Absolutely nothing about how these characters have been written, performed, filmed, or edited has created a believable romantic connection beforehand to make that moment feel earned. Among numerous nonsensical alterations to the source material, Catherine's older brother Hindley is entirely absent from this film.
Where is he right now?
When Catherine's father brings home young Heathcliff, she enthusiastically accepts him as a pet. Meaning that when Emerald Fennell read a harrowing story about a dark-skinned child being adopted into a family where the oldest brother abuses him for several years, she thought to herself, wouldn't it be great fun for a rich white blonde woman to have a poor brought home to treat like a pet? And that's a decision that Emerald Fennell doubled down and committed to as an adult.
I don't think any of us are nice. I just don't know anyone nice. Not really.
You have a weird energy.
The film's young Catherine is the one to name Heathcliff, and she says that she has chosen this name after her dead brother. So first you erase Hindley from your story despite how significant he is to the events that unfold in the book, and how integral he is to turning Heathcliff into a vengeful adult. And then you decide that movie Catherine's boring situationship is a poor boy whom she has named after her dead brother. If you wanted to tell an incestuous Wuthering Heights story, you only needed to continue further on into the book, when Heathcliff manipulates his son Linton and Catherine's daughter Kathy into marrying one another, even though they are first cousins.
I've said it before, I will say it again. I'm not marrying my cousin.
If you can stop Uncle John and Aunt Liz, they're very happy.
Our friendship is built on our mutual distrust of England.
So movie Catherine takes it upon herself to try to teach Heathcliff to read, but she is temperamental and entirely ill-suited to effectively teach a child how to read and write, so when she mocks Heathcliff for not picking up these lessons more quickly, he gets upset and runs off, and then she eventually goes and apologizes to him, and I suppose they're this film's version of okay. But there is little to nothing else shown to indicate that she would be appealing to him to where he would become so emotionally entangled with her. In the book, Heathcliff was being provided with education because the Earnshaw family patriarch made sure that he had access to education, but once he dies, and Hindley is now the Earnshaw family patriarch, he stops allowing Heathcliff to access education, and this is part of what keeps him oppressed and stuck in a lower class. The racism is of course part of this, as is the hard labor he's subjected to, but depriving him of an education is also an essential part of what turns him into the vengeful man he becomes. This is such an important part of the story that when Heathcliff is enacting vengeance on others, he threatens the teacher who is coming to Wuthering Heights to teach Hindley's son Hareton in order to make sure that Hareton is deprived of that education the way that Hindley had deprived Heathcliff. The weaponization of education and literacy, and more specifically, the lack of access to them, is rightly treated in the novel as a heinous transgression. Yet another reason why the library girlies love this book, because we want everyone to read books. And actually, while I'm on the subject, one of the books I'm reading right now, it's an ebook so I can't show it to you, but it's called Richmond Unchained by Luke G. Williams, and it's the biography of the world's first black sporting superstar, a man named Bill Richmond. And interestingly enough, one of the things that was mentioned in passing was something to do with how certain training for certain jobs was something that was not open to people who were not from England or perhaps Britain in a broader sense. But regardless, now that I think about that, it sort of aligns with the time period of when Wuthering Heights was both written and when the story was set. An inequality of access to education or certain vocational training is unjust, and it certainly seems as though Emily Brontë was aware of that more than you would expect an upper-class English woman to be in the early to mid-1800s. But all of this to say that the film fails to engage with any of those ideas in a meaningful way, and instead turns the topic into a petulant argument between these two central characters in their childhood. So again, I fail to see how anyone is meant to be convinced that there is this strong, cosmic, romantic connection between them. If you are too desperate to make your characters be physically intimate and salacious, to the point that you are unwilling or perhaps incapable of taking the necessary time to woo the audience with their love story as much as they are either intentionally or inadvertently wooing one another as characters, you will not win over the audience who has a deep affection and reverence for a good literary romance, or romanticism in fiction in general. And back to the reading issue, since I'm already talking about it anyway, Heathcliff in the film appears to have never learned how to read. As a result, when he wants to send letters to Thrushcross Grange, be they to Nellie or to Catherine, he forces Isabella to write those letters. Would you like to see one of the pieces of merchandise that was given to members of the press? Stationery. Are they making a mockery of illiteracy and the weaponization of denying certain people access to education? You may be the judge of that.
You have a weird energy.
This film has absolutely no substantive understanding of the role that class plays in even the car crash reimagining of this story. They're so desperate to indulge in boring hookup scenes that aren't anywhere near as salacious as I had assumed they would be, that they never have these two characters speak to each other in any sort of way that would give their relationship dimension. Even within the whitewashed version of this story that they've presented to the audience, Catherine feels she cannot marry G'day Heathcliff because her father has gambled the household into financial ruin. The historical context of the story is such that even a woman originally born into this higher class would not have the means of lifting herself out of such a predicament unless she were to marry someone with money. But they never talk about this in any sort of meaningful way. Even if you quickly resolve the misunderstanding part with some sort of a, you didn't hear everything that I said, they would still need to more fully unpack the fact that G'day Heathcliff had no right to be resentful of Catherine for feeling as though marrying a wealthy man is necessary for her survival. Thus, we have not been given any reason as to why G'day Heathcliff would like her, since all we know is that she made fun of him for not being able to read or follow her terrible attempts at teaching him how to read. And we have no reason given for why she would like him when he has seemingly no comprehension of how she might feel like marrying the wealthy, even-tempered man living down the road would be a practical means of survival, even though he's the one deprived of things because of his lower class standing. And if he does understand that, that's news to me because the film did nothing to communicate that to be the case to viewers. There already has been, and will presumably be, far more said in any number of reviews of this film that it's a baffling or even repugnant decision to continue to whitewash Heathcliff. Heathcliff is repeatedly described in the book as being dark-skinned, and he's insulted and referred to by a racial slur by other characters, and he even laments to Nellie how he wishes that he could look like Edgar Linton, who has blonde hair, light skin, he's rich, and so on and so forth. Heathcliff believes that if he looked like that, then he would be able to be with Catherine and in general have a much better quality of life.
And the Heathcliff casting, I mean, has had some comments around if that should be a person of color and, you know, casting Jacob in it. What do you kind of think about that commentary?
I think the thing is everyone who loves this book has such a personal connection to it. And so you can only ever kind of make the movie that you sort of imagined yourself when you read it, and then you can, I don't know, I think I was sort of focusing on kind of sadomasochistic elements of it.
Emily Brontë, the upper-class, educated Englishwoman, told a harrowing story about the trauma of being racially abused to such an extent that you become a vengeful monster. And Emerald Fennell went, but what if two white Australians did mediocre hookup scenes together? The movie is begging the audience, look at me, look at me, look at me. And yet, you've offered nothing worth looking at. On top of whitewashing Heathcliff into G'day Heathcliff, it is also insidious that the only characters that they do hire people of color to play are either treated as an inconvenient nuisance or a villain. Edgar in this film is often little more than reasonable and nice, but we're supposed to be terribly annoyed with him simply because he is not G'day Heathcliff. Now, I'm not annoyed at him. In this movie, I'm Team Edgar Linton and Isabella Linton without any doubt. The first time they showed the two characters together, I went, oh look, it's a book-accurate Heathcliff and Catherine.
Not a joke, just a fact.
Nellie in the book is often the narrator, but she was also there to witness and be told various parts of what went on by whomever is sharing that bit of information with her, and she then retells all of these different parts of the story to Mr. Lockwood, who is a new tenant at Thrushcross Grange, who mostly serves as an audience insert into this story. If he's learning about what happened with this toxic ensemble, then so are we, the readers. Yet this film is desperate to try to make Nellie out to be the villain. Emerald Fennell wants me to blame the Asian maid for the toxicity of these two leads. I reject that wholeheartedly.
Back the fuck up! Get away from me, all of you!
This Gone with the Windified version of Wuthering Lows kept finding new ways to do just that, lower my opinion of it. The film twists the book material of when Nellie notices that Heathcliff has overheard a select portion of the conversation to instead have Nellie in the film notice that Heathcliff is approaching, so she intentionally questions Catherine in such a way that Heathcliff will overhear Catherine say something against him, and the film tries so desperately hard to put the entire blame of their separation on Nellie, even though the reason Nellie lashed out in this way is because Catherine had just said something extremely vicious and mean-spirited to Nellie. It was something along the lines of, no one loves you, or no one will ever love you. I don't remember the exact line, and I have no intention of ever subjecting myself to this film again. The film never acknowledges the fact that Catherine was vicious and malicious to Nellie in the first place, and that there is a power imbalance between them, where Nellie must navigate the world much differently because she's not of the same upper-class standing as most of the main characters in this film. Because your main blonde, self-insert rich girl has all the freedom in the world to be unkind and malicious and haughty, but you still need to root for her to have a love story. No, I don't.
The chocolate, Leo. You've had the fucking peeler in my head.
And the fact that Heathcliff in the book is so deeply traumatized by years, if not decades, of racial abuse, that he was denied of his education and forced to do hard labor for the Earnshaw household, and he lashes out and swears vengeance on everyone. He marries Isabella specifically because she's Edgar's heir, because she's his sister, not his ward, the way that she was in this film. Heathcliff is so abusive to her that she runs away, and he also threw a knife at her, so when she shows up to visit Nellie right after she has run away, she's bleeding. And then Heathcliff enacts the same abuse onto Hindley's son that was done to him, and he also abuses his own son and Catherine's daughter into forcing them to marry each other as first cousin spouses. And your takeaway from all of that, which you wanted to commit to, was that you wanted to remake that story the way you always wanted it to be, which is a toxic situationship between two white people. Even if you wanted to do a fix-it reimagining of Wuthering Heights, where you give Catherine and Heathcliff a happy romantic story where they are able to be together before they both die, your insistence on casting a white actor suggests that you don't see men of color as viable love interests. Shall we have another brief interlude where I show you a piece of merchandise given to the members of the press? This is a sewing needlework kit. And you might be asking yourself, well, what does that have to do with the story that you read in the book? Because you who are watching this, of course, you are a reader who reads books. In the film, after Catherine and Isabella have had their arguments and falling out over the fact that Isabella is now interested in Heathcliff, Isabella proceeds to self-harm herself on the palm of her hand with the needle that she is in the middle of using to do needlework. So your bright idea for merchandise was to make merchandise out of the self-harm addition to this anti-intellectual rewrite of a literary classic. On top of the merchandise, which relates to your male lead, who was never able to learn how to read because his primary love interest humiliated him out of following through with learning how to read and write. He needed to have his degraded wife be the one to write those letters where he's trying to win back his primary love interest. Okay then. Bad wigs, plastic-looking jewelry, whitewashing, and no class analysis, or even just addressing the issue of class in such a way that would make your narrative cohesive. A further example of that, the fact that Heathcliff overhears Catherine say that it would degrade her to marry him, so he runs off to make a fortune, and he comes back without the bad wig, and he has new clothes. Why wouldn't he change his accent? If he wants to make himself over in such a way that he would fit into a mold of what he believes would make him an acceptable or worthy person whom Catherine would be able to marry, wouldn't he also change his accent? Now, me personally, I find posh accents to be unbearable more often than not, but in the rules of this story and the setting, it would make sense. You've got a dreadfully unconvincing accent for Catherine, accent work that doesn't follow Heathcliff's narrative and character journey. What was the reason for any of these decisions? And the fact that this movie was so desperate to sell itself to the audience with the promise of being salacious, only to play the most mediocre, boring, unconvincing hookup scenes. If you want to watch that type of material, I mean, Heated Rivalry is right there. Even the montage in Joyride, where most of the characters are engaging in some sort of NSFW action going on, that is far more entertaining to watch. When they finally reached the point of G'day Heathcliff and Catherine having an affair, I was left going, is that it? That's the payoff to whatever it is that you've been doing to bring us to this point?
I saw that going differently in my mind.
The constructed sets look terrible, the jewelry looks plastic and tacky, multiple outfits Catherine wears looks like polyester, there was plastic wrapped around some pillars or whatever those things were. Perhaps these decorations are merely a self-fulfilling prophecy because this is a movie that is as carcinogenic as the plastic waste you have added to the world by visually building this story in these ways. And the giant stacks of bottles that were hot glue gun together to be the set decoration when Catherine returns to Wuthering Heights over the news that her father is dead. He's an alcoholic. Do you get it? That's why the bottles are hot glue gun together. This is a movie so catastrophically bad that you question everyone who has name recognition for their willingness to be a part of it and keep their names attached to it. When you, as a filmmaker, admit to having spoken with the Brontë Parsonage Museum and immediately follow up that with a declaration that you can't say that you're adapting Wuthering Heights, is that a kind of Freudian slip? Are we referring to the same Brontë Parsonage Museum with an entire page dedicated to talking about Black history from the time of the Brontes, about explicitly comparing the ways that the mistreatment of Heathcliff in the book, the refusal to give him more than one name, and even the city that Catherine's father got him from, that being Liverpool, aligns with the possibility of him being a Black man, and even lists various abolitionists who were connected to the Brontë family? Is it theoretically possible that the Brontë Parsonage Museum would want to distance itself from a film that so willfully and maliciously refuses to engage with the complexities and socio-political commentary of this novel? Well, we have no way of knowing for sure, unless official statements were to be made, which I'm assuming they will not be, but one can't help but wonder. If being anti-intellectual, boring, devoid of any believable romantic or sexual chemistry, and insisting on using bad wigs and dressing your wealthy female lead character in jewelry that looks like it's made of plastic, if all of that wasn't baffling enough on its own, there was such an insistence on poorly adapting and misinterpreting Wuthering Heights, when if you wanted to reimagine a period piece full of cruelty, toxicity, and smut, Dangerous Liaisons was right there. One would think this director would know about, considering she has stated on the record she's a fan of Cruel Intentions, unless she somehow doesn't know that that film is also based on a classic novel.
Cruel Intentions.
As I've already said, the film's writing is terrible, the character work is non-existent, and the acting of these two lead actors is the worst acting I have seen from both of them. But even with all of that, I cannot say that I will swear off on them, because I own Birds of Prey on physical media. That's still a fun time for me to watch.
Run, Piggy, run!
And Jacob Elordi's next movie is a Ridley Scott movie. My regular audience already knows that if you say Ridley Scott, I'm already there. The ticket is reserved. The source material is read. The Dog Stars is on my watch list. That source material video has been up on my channel since last year because I've been waiting. That was supposed to come out in March of this year, and then they pushed it back. Why is that? Ridley Scott and Guy Pearce on a press tour? Now that will require popcorn just as much as the movie itself. I don't know what happened with Jacob Elordi, because he was absolutely sensational in Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, and then I watched this movie and he's unrecognizable to me, in a bad way. Even when Catherine dies and Heathcliff sees her body, I didn't believe a single thing he was saying or doing. The creature gifting Elizabeth a leaf was more romantic than anything that was done in Withering Lows. Anyone who follows along with my reviews knows that I can normally find something redeemable about a new theatrical release I'm covering, even if it's a film that has a multitude of problems. But ultimately, the only compliment I would send in the direction of this film is that Alison Oliver needs to be booked for something that puts her in the spotlight and isn't terrible. Come to think of it, Alison, have you ever read Runtime by Catherine Ryan Howard? Diva, get a producer to secure the rights to this book. Let's make you a final girl.